Hello everyone, in this week's After Effects scripting tutorial, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. Today we're going to be reverse engineering a project with a script, which essentially means that we're going to take this composition right here and we're going to create a script that will basically, we can run it and it's going to generate this instantly for us. It's sort of a way to package any composition or little After Effects project into a script by hand. So it's going to be going over a lot of techniques I probably won't have time to just do a whole topic on. So there's going to be lots of little tips and tricks involved, and I'm not reading off any code, I'm just literally doing this off the top of my head. So again, we're going to be basically making a script that will grab this comp right here and generate all the layers and use the same effects and make it look cool just like this. So first off, of course, we need extend script open and we're going to start scripting. So the first thing, of course, we need to do in any script is to set up some variables. I'm going to start with one called project, which is equal to our app.project. And in this case, we're going to assume we're creating our own comp. So variable for comp is going to be equal to our app.project.items, and let's add a composition. The name of this composition is Ballin', and now's a good time to break out the guide. I'm almost always using the scripting guide, especially when it comes to things like add comp and add solid, just to check. I need the name, the width, the height, the pixel aspect ratio, the duration is going to be about 3 minutes and 3 seconds. So in seconds, that's going to be 183 seconds. And then finally, also have the duration and frame rate. The frame rate, we'll just do 30, and that should create our composition for us. Now let's go ahead and grab our comp and open it in the viewer so we can open it up and see it creating all the layers. So now I think what we'll do is we'll turn on motion blur for the composition. So I'll say comp.motion blur equals true. And I'm not sure if that's actually it, so I'm going to go back into the guide and just type in motion blur. That's for the layer, that's for the comp item. So yes, that's how we turn the motion blur on. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a variable for each of our 7 layers here. So we'll have our, I guess, ball layer. We'll have our text layer 1, text layer 2, our adjustment layer, our amplitude layer, our background layer, and then our audio layer. With this particular project, we're going to assume that the footage and the music is already imported, so we can just kind of grab the elements and do our thing. Another thing I want to do as well is enclose all of this in a function. So we're just going to create a function called createComp, and we're just going to be able to run this function at any time like this and generate and open up the composition. All right, so now let's go ahead and work on importing and creating each of these layers one by one. The order in which we'll want to do that is from basically bottom to top. So we'll want to start with this layer 7, then go on to the next one, and go up. So the first thing we want to do is import our music track into the composition as a layer. What we want to do for this then is grab our audio layer here and set this equal to our composition that we have, our comp.layers, and we're going to add something. But we need an item, we need the actual reference here to add to the composition. So in order to do this, what I'm going to do is create a custom function, which we're going to use a few times. This is going to be called getItem. So inside of here, we're just going to take one thing, and that's the name of the item. So I'm just going to say name. And this is going to be really simple. Every time we call getItem and give it a name, we're going to search through all of the items in here, and if we find the name, then give us whatever that is. So to do this, just a for loop here going from 1 up to our project.num items. And in this case, what we're going to do is going to say if app.project.item_i, the current item we're looking at, if its name.index of the name that we brought in from up here does not equal -1, then return that item, or app.project.item_i. So what we're saying is if the current item that we're looking at, if its name, if it has a match, then we want to return it. If you're not familiar with index of, it's essentially a way to check does the index exist for this bit of text called name inside of this name. So if we type in up here, when we say add, we'll say get item, and the name we want to pass is just called ballin.mp3. So in this case, if we run it really quick, you can see we're now going to generate this ballin comp and then add our audio layer. And you can see that I have to do a bunch of undos. So what I'm also going to do is around our create comp function, or when we call it, I'm going to add a begin undo group and an app.end undo group. And we'll just call this generate composition. All right, so now we've gotten as far as bringing in one bit of audio here. Now what we can do is do the same thing with our next piece of footage. And to do that, we're going to just do the same thing and paste it up to the next one, which is our background layer. So in this case, instead of adding ballin.mp3, what text are we going to look for? Well, right here I have a date, which is just 2010. And that's enough information, and it's differentiated from everything to find it. So it will find 2010 in here and add it for us. Then we can move on to the next one. We don't have anything to import. It's actually just an audio amplitude. So what I can do for this is reference the app.execute menu ID command. What I want to do is select this ballin track, and then I want to go to keyframe assistant and convert audio to keyframes. Many people may say that's impossible to do, but it's actually possible with a menu ID command. So if I go to David Torno's list here, and I can type in convert audio to keyframes, that's going to give me the number 5015. So for our amplitude layer, what we can do after we create our ballin layer, so now we actually need to start ordering these layers in which how we add them. And what I'll do for our amplitude layer is add it after our background layer. And now in order to convert the audio to keyframes, what we'll do is after we've added our ballin track, the MP3 file, I'm going to grab app.execute command, and we're going to use the command 5015. Let's go ahead and try it out and see if it gives us the right result. So it looks like it can't do that because it selects this other layer first. So just to troubleshoot this here, I'm going to disable this code and try it again. Let's go ahead and try and grab our audio layer and say selected equals true, just to make sure it's selected. In order to get around this, because I don't think the number I was using is right, I'm going to use the app.findMenu command ID feature to go ahead and find the right one. I'll try that. And now it's going to properly convert that for me. So what I can do now is add my bit of code after the background layer is created. And now that's going to create my amplitude layer afterward. But I don't actually have a layer that describes the amplitude layer. It's empty right now. So I'm going to say this is equal to our comp.layer1. This isn't going to say that our first layer in the comp is always this layer, just currently that's what it is. So after that, we need to have an adjustment layer. And the way we create adjustment layers is pretty simple. We're just going to create a solid and then turn on a switch essentially. So I'll say adjustment layer is equal to our comp.layers, and I'm going to add a solid. And just like usual, when I add a solid, I have to reference this just to make sure that I'm putting in all the right values. First put in a color, which in this case, white is just easy. And then a name, adjustment layer. And then we'll just choose the same width and height as the comp, same pixel aspect ratio, and duration was 183 seconds. Then to convert this to an adjustment layer, we just grab the name of it and set the property adjustment layer equal to true. So adjustment layer dot adjustment layer equals true. This would just essentially in any other case mean layer dot adjustment layer equals true. Let's go ahead and double check this. And there we are. So now we just have 2 text layers to make, and we have one more thing to bring in real quick. So go ahead and add text layer 1 and 2 down here. And our ball layer as well. So for our first bit of text, we're going to grab comp.layers.addText, and the name of this text is just going to be Ballin. And it's pretty much going to be the exact same thing for the other text. I believe it's just a shadow, so they have the exact same values. And then lastly, for the ball layer, we need to import an image, which is going to be our ball here. And it looks like the text inside of it we can search for is big, B-I-G. So I can use this text up here that I used to grab my background and other layer. And instead of saying ballin.mp3, we'll just search for big. So now let's go ahead and run this and see if we get all 7 of our layers. Awesome. So now everything is imported. The only thing that's left to change are some of the values, such as adding effects, adjusting some of those properties, and changing up like the scale and positioning. All right, so going forward now, let's take a look at the next steps in adjusting this. Our audio layer has no effects really on it. It doesn't have any keyframes or expressions that I need to worry about, so that's good. We can move on past the audio layer. It looks like the background layer has a couple things changed on it. If we pull up the transform effects, we can see that the scale, anchor point, and position have been changed, and it also has a paint and an exposure effect. In our case, the only thing that's painted out is this logo here, and one thing that's tricky about scripting is accessing these paint features is a little bit complicated. So for the scope of this tutorial, we're going to assume the paint is doing itself, but we're going to be basically adding all these effects and adjusting their values. So the first thing we need to do, this is our background layer. I'm going to grab our background layer, and the first thing we need to change is our anchor point. So I'll grab the anchor point and set the value to be 1536 by 1152, and it looks like all of our layers here are also going to have motion blur turned on. So I'll grab my background layer, .motion blur, set that equal to true. Then I also need to adjust this position. So I'll grab background layer .property position, and the value we're going to give that is 1216 by 540. Then we're going to also adjust the scale of this background layer. So I'll grab the scale value, set it to be 85.9 by 85.9. And then we can also add an exposure effect. Now the way I add effects is there's 2 steps basically. First you gotta get the match name of the effect. To do that, I just load up a new JavaScript and go app.project.activeItem.layer, this is layer 6, .effect1, the first effect, and I want to get the match name for exposure, which is Adobe Exposure 2. So back over in here to add the exposure effects, let's just create a generic variable called this effect, and then I'll say this effect this effect equals background layer dot effects dot add property, and the property we're going to add is that match name we just got. So that's going to add the exposure effect. The only thing that's been changed, if we reset it here, you can see is the exposure value. So I'll grab, there's a couple ways we can do it. In this case, I'm just going to say background layer effects. It's called exposure, and the value I want to change is also called exposure. So I'll grab that, set the value to 1.94, and that's going to be good, I think, for our background layer. We'll ignore the paint for now, but that should be good to set up all that. Next is the audio amplitude layer. The only thing we need to do on this guy is if we want to, we can remove the left and right channels it's going to create. You can see we have left and right here. So what I can do is my amplitude layer, and I'm going to grab effect1 dot remove, And I'm going to do that twice. Reason being is I'm going to go delete and then 1 again, delete. Let's go ahead and run this guy again and see how we do. Looks like we forgot a bracket there. So we got rid of the left and right channels on the audio amplitude. We've also got our exposure set up. So move on to the next guy here. It's our adjustment layer. I'm using a custom Noir Modern universe filter. But again, same way we can get this, I'm going to use this bit of code here to access layer 4, effect 1, and the match name. This is going to be the match name we're adding, so that's what we're going to do. So for our adjustment layer, I'm going to grab this effect is equal to our adjustment layer dot effects dot add property and put in our match name. And then this one's actually got a couple things changing, but it's only from this first drop down. So we need to change the value of this drop down to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'll grab this effect, which is referencing our Noir Modern, and I'm going to grab the property 1, set the value to be 9. So this is going to say grab this effect, grab the first property, which actually may not be, it may be this browse presets. So let me check. Effect 1, and the first property, what's the name? First property is undefined, so the second must be the dropdown. Vignette preset, yes. So instead of using property 1, use 2 and set that to 9. Let's just check the value, which is 9. So yeah, we want 9. Let's just double check the transform of this guy. It's standard anchor point position scale. We can move on to the layer called Ballin. This actually has a couple of effects applied, so what we can do is quickly run through and apply the effects it needs. In this case, it's layer 3 in our comp, and we want to get effect 1 match name, effect 2 match name, and effect 3 match name. And what this means is that we'll go to text layer 1 here. This effect is going to equal text layer 1 dot effects dot add property. First thing we're going to add is that Adobe camera lens blur. And then if you hit Control D twice, we can duplicate this line of code, and we'll do this info grain duplication, which is our match grain. And then we'll also have Adobe Glow 2. Alright, and then inside of our lens blur, the only thing we're doing is really nothing. We're just applying a very soft blur, so we don't have to do anything to adjust that. For our match grain, we are changing the viewing mode to final output, and we're changing the layer to match that. And in order for us to do that, we need to go below our grain duplication here. We're going to say this effect, which in this case is going to be the match grain. We're going to grab the first property, which is our viewing mode, and set that equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to set the value to 5, set that to final viewing mode. And then for the next one, we can go ahead and set up the layer. Let's check what this current value is. So layer 3, effect number 2, the second property. Let's get the value. Set to 6, so it's literally just the layer number. So what we'll do, instead we'll say this effect dot property 2, the noise source layer. We're going to set the value to 6, which is equivalent to our background layer. And then again for the glow, everything is basically set to the default, so nothing really needed for that. Looking at the anchor point and stuff, it looks like we need to adjust a few things here. The one we currently just made is just sort of a glowy sheen with 5% opacity. So for text layer 1, after we do our glow application, let's set the position. We'll say text layer 1 dot property position, and we'll set the value here 780 by 447. And then after that, we'll also set the scale. For the scale, it's going to be 179.5 for both of the values. And then lastly, the opacity for text layer 1. And we'll set that to be 5. So now we have all those values set up. You can see there's also a mask applied, but in this case, it's going to be a little bit out of the scope of reconstructing it for this tutorial. It will still recreate everything down to the T. We have a roughen edges, a camera lens blur, and a match grain again. So what I'm going to do is just copy and paste the match grain and the camera lens blur for it, because that will save us a lot of time. But we also need to add this roughen edges, which if you adjust the values, you can see do change. I need to adjust the border. So first, let me grab the match name of this. This is layer 2. The first effect, what's going to be the match name? Adobe roughen edges. So go back into here, and we're going to set this effect equal to our text layer 1. Inside the effects, we're going to add a property, and that's going to be our roughen edges. And then our roughen edges, we're going to grab the third value, which is the border. And we're going to set the value, I believe it was like 0.6. Set to 0.6. And that should be good for our text there. Lastly, we're going to move on to this basketball here. And this is going to be pretty much the same as the previous ones. Let's go ahead and first turn on the motion blur. I'll grab ball layer.motion blur, set that equal to true. I do have a hue and saturation applied on here, but it's not really doing much, so we'll just delete that. I'm going to copy and paste the camera lens blur back onto that because it also needs one. And above here, I forgot to change this from text layer 1 to text layer 2, just to make sure that stays consistent and doesn't apply to the wrong layer. And then this needs to be our ball layer. So we're going to add a camera lens blur, and then same thing, we have a match grain, and we're going to apply it to the ball layer rather than text layer 2. All right, now we have a couple more things on this layer to adjust, and we also forgot on our text layer down here to adjust our other transforms. So the position is going to be slightly different. So I'll just go ahead and I'm going to copy and paste the scale and position from our previous text layer from text layer 1 and use those on text layer 2 here. So the only difference here is we're going to add a little bit, change these values a little bit, and I just want to make sure those are good. Then for lastly our layer here, we have some transform adjustments as well as expressions to apply. So let's go ahead and first change the anchor point. I'll grab my ball layer and I'll set the property anchor point. We'll set the value to 778.5 and 805.5. And then for our ball layer, we're going to grab the property for position, set the value to be 572 and 604. Now you can see we have an expression. I'm going to go ahead and apply this expression by grabbing my ball layer, and I'm going to grab the property called position.expression and set this equal to, in single quotes, my expression. Now if there are multiple lines in your expression, you'll need to add an end line and bring it back. My bad, that was really loud, I bet. Sorry. Anyway, you'll need to have an end line in there to make sure you have multiple lines. So we have that expression being applied there. That's good. And we also need to adjust the scale. So our ball layer dot property scale dot set value, and the scale for this guy is going to be 15. And then lastly, we also have an expression applied on rotation. So I'll copy that, and I'll grab my ball layer dot property rotation, and I'll set the expression equal to single quotes, and inside of there again, paste the expression. All right, let's run this and see how we did. So it's getting caught up here on this effect.property 2. Okay, so it looks like for the add grain effects, we need to apply them last because it thinks that there's a layer 6, well, before layer 6 exists. So if I grab all of my my grain additions here, I need to clump them all together, which doesn't matter because they're applying to the right layers. I'm going to grab them all here, and let's go ahead and bring them down after the creation of all of our layers and try it again. All right, that's not bad. We're actually looking at the same exact comp as before. Let's see what we did wrong. So it looks like one of the main things that's causing the problem is this Noir Modern. If I turn it off, I can see everything, but if it's not, I cannot. So as you can see, we've very well recreated this comp, and it even has animation built into it. The whole point of this video was to have an animated basketball go with the music, so we've actually already incorporated that just using this simple reverse engineering tactic. So that's really it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. That is basically a simple way to go about reverse engineering projects. It's about just reading the projects and basically copying and adjusting the values and adding them into a composition. So it's just gone over a couple ways of different things that I do, ways that I look for information while coding, ways that I basically interpolate things in After Effects. So that's just one method you can use to reverse engineer projects, which is useful to both create your own scripts, to learn, and to do many other things. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave it the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button and the bell button down below to be notified of new uploads every week. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time.